There were many players who played their entire careers in the Negro Leagues. And if you look at their stats, if you look at what they had to go through in order to play the game, it's amazing. It's truly amazing.
You're watching the Spotlight Network. Starring Hollywood's newsman, Logan Crawford.
They now believe a single member.
He works with TV and film legends. And now, Logan's shining the spotlight on the world's top emerging authors and creators.
International were abducted.
This is Spotlight with Logan Crawford. Streaming on Roku, Apple TV, and Amazon Fire TV.
I'm Logan Crawford, and right now on Spotlight, we're stepping up to the plate with an amazing author. His name is Michael Margolis, and he has penned a book you're just going to love. It is called Negro League versus Major League Baseball. This compelling deep dive compares baseball's greatest legends from two divided worlds, revealing untold stories of brilliance, resilience, and racial injustice. Whether you're a diehard baseball fan or a student of American history, this powerful tribute changes the way we see America's favorite pastime forever. We're delighted to have this very talented author join us here today. We thank the team for helping us put him on TV today, and we ask viewers like you to support authors like him by subscribing to our channel and by purchasing his amazing book. The links are below this interview. Michael, thank you so much for joining us here today on Spotlight.
Pleasure.
It's a pleasure to have you on the show. You're a native New Yorker, born and bred. You bleed Yankee red, Mets blue and orange, or whatever their colors are. And I'd imagine Dodger baseball colors as well. Tell us a little bit about your love story with the New York baseball teams.
Well, I was fortunate enough to be a baseball fan early in my life, certainly under the age of 10. And there were three teams in New York at that point: New York Yankees, Brooklyn Dodgers, and New York Giants. I got the pleasure to go to all of those stadiums and see them play. They were amazing teams to see, and for my 50 cents that I saved up, I could go and sit in the bleachers, which is what I could afford, plus my 15 cents on the subway, to actually go to different games and watch them play against teams from around the world and around America. Of course, I did grow up in a time where baseball was integrated already. However, my father, who was a real baseball fan, pointed out to me that some of the slurs that existed toward black men continued, and you could hear them in the stands. They were not very nice at that time, but times have changed.
Yeah, times have changed, fortunately. So your dad was acquainted with the Negro League, told you about it, and then for this book, you did a little research to find out more about it, right?
Yeah, it sparked my interest. It's kind of always been there for me, but I decided in my semi-retirement that I would take an attempt at finding out more. And basically what I found out was the black players who played in the Negro Leagues faced a lot to get recognized, to show their talent. And unfortunately, not that many of them got the opportunity to ultimately play in the major leagues after 1947, when Jackie Robinson signed with the Brooklyn Dodgers.
Yeah. So he was one of the lucky ones. He got called up, but a lot of very talented black baseball players weren't so fortunate. Is that what your research tells you?
Oh, absolutely. He was the first in the National League. A gentleman by the name of Larry Doby was the first in the American League, and that opened the gates for some players, not a lot.
Yeah.
There were many players who played their entire careers in the Negro Leagues, and if you look at their stats, if you look at what they had to go through in order to play the game, it's amazing. It's truly amazing.
Yeah. It was almost like a two-tier system. If you were white, you had to be at this level, but if you were black, you had to be at this level.
Correct.
Yeah,
There was an unwritten agreement between the baseball owners that they would not hire black players.
amazing.
Uh, it, it was, I mean, although how terrible that is, it was indicative of the time that
Right.
of that particular period. Okay,
Yeah.
there's no denying that the situation in America, okay, and how Americans treated blacks at that time um, fostered that type of belief.
Yeah. Like you said, you could even hear it in the stands as a child with your dad. And
Mm-hmm.
that was after baseball had been integrated. So you
Yeah,
could imagine.
it was I must have been somewhere between 6 and 8 years old. The league had probably started to integrate. It was not fully integrated. There
Mhm.
were a few players scattered around the leagues, but um, although most fans were respectful, there were, lack of a better word, there were diehard racists who were in the stands who didn't like it.
Amazing, amazing. Your book highlights some of the stories of the talent of these players like Satchel Paige and Josh Gibson. Tell us about these players.
Okay, well, certainly the two most outstanding would be those two gentlemen.
Mhm.
Um, you have to understand when you talk about the Negro Leagues, um, it is difficult to have exacting records of this because of the way they played, the money that they had to keep complete and records of people. But Josh Gibson was a catcher, and Josh Gibson is estimated at actually hitting 800 plus home runs, more than anyone in Major League Baseball. Okay, um, his he was a leader. He was a mentor. He exemplified the patience that it took to be a player in the Negro Leagues because it took a lot. It took,
Mm.
it took a tremendous amount of biting your lip in order to play. In order to play, uh, the other gentleman, Satchel Paige, was fortunate enough to actually into his 40s had actually got into the major leagues and did get to play a little bit in the major leagues, yeah, after integration. And he was, even at that point in his 40s, he was a dominant force. There is a very interesting story about him that I did wind up reading, if I could tell you about it.
Sure.
Okay, back in the time of the Great Depression, there were games called barnstorming, and it did happen that Negro League players did get to play against Major League Baseball. And there was one particular game where Satchel Paige pitched against Dizzy Dean, another Hall of Fame.
Mhm.
And Dizzy said after the game, he was quoted as saying that if he had Satchel Paige on his team, they could have clinched the pennant in July.
Wow. Wow. That's
That, that's
amazing.
that. That's
That's quite a
how
testament,
amazing he
right?
was with the baseball. Yeah, that's how amazing he was with the baseball.
Yeah. If you could see one dream matchup between a Negro League legend and an MLB great, who would it
Mm.
be?
That's hard. Probably the one that stands out would probably be Josh Gibson against Babe Ruth.
What I
Okay.
was going to say, yeah.
Um, as I said, with not complete records, Gibson is listed as having more home runs than anyone else, including Babe Ruth. Uh, the I guess at the time it would have been considered a compliment, but Gibson was known as the Black Babe Ruth.
Hmm.
That was actually that was actually a coin name that he was given. So it was an accolade to his strength and who he was as a player.
Absolutely. What do you hope readers take away from your book? What do you hope they learn about the game, about race relations in America, about where we come from?
Well, there's several stops along the way. Number one, you have to acknowledge a couple of things about playing in the Negro Leagues. Number one was that the fields that they played on were not pristine, not like Major League Baseball. The fields that they played on had divots, had holes in the outfield, and just to navigate the game, okay, you had to be brilliant at your craft. There was no other way. Otherwise, you're going to break your ankle or you're going to hit by a baseball. But the fields did not allow it, okay, because that's not where they got to play. Versus the major leagues, who had pristine fields. A ball that bounces weirdly in Major League Baseball is a rarity. It was a regular occurrence in the Negro Leagues. So that's one thing you have to recognize. You have to recognize that they couldn't eat everywhere. They couldn't stay at the hotels they needed to stay at. They traveled around primarily in the Midwest. wasn't unusual to spend the night on a bus and have to play the next day. Again, not like the major leagues. So you're going to take away that their records as players were actually much better than if you did a side by side, because they had fields that allowed them to. They had the comforts and the support of Major League Baseball, which they did not have. They didn't get the pay that they would have gotten. So it's a story of what segregation was. Okay, yeah. It was far
Kind of a
before
microcosm of America. I
Oh,
mean, the
absolutely,
same thing was
absolutely.
true in every field, whether you wanted to be a
Right.
doctor, a lawyer, a scientist,
Mm.
a baseball player, you were held back. It wasn't a level playing field, so to speak.
No,
And I
right.
think your work does a great job at highlighting this one sector, but the applications are vast throughout American
Oh,
society. And of course, the ripples are still being felt today.
absolutely. I mean, this is supposed to baseball is called the America's pastime.
Right.
Okay. And there was a point in time, obviously pointed out in my book, that it wasn't all of America's pastime. It might have been within each segment, but it was not recognized by the general public. Um, the those hardships, as I said, made these players' lives and their careers really much more than when I'm looking at a regular MLB player, just simply because what they took to play the game. Um, there are today, fortunately, 37 players who have made it primarily from the Negro Leagues. There are some who played both careers, did get the chance to play in MLB, who are enshrined in the Hall of Fame, which is, in my mind, a start. Okay, at
Exactly.
recognizing players who deserve the accolades. I think it's a lesson to white America, and it should be a source of pride to Black America.
Agreed 100%. And your book does a wonderful job to highlight the disparities and to highlight the achievements and to highlight this era in American history. The name of the book is The Negro League versus Major League Baseball. It is a compelling deep dive that compares baseball's greatest legends from two divided worlds, revealing untold stories of brilliance, resilience, and racial injustice. Michael, thank you so much for joining me here today.
It is my pleasure. Thank you.
Pleasure's all mine, sir. I appreciate your insight and your wisdom. To the folks at home, I'm Logan Crawford, thanking you for your time this time. Until next time on Spotlight.